Hello and welcome to Drunk on Tea. Today I'm taking another look at these AK Playmarkers to see if I can improve the way they worked before and get some more interesting results. For this video here I'm using this Gretchin model, which as you can see I've primed black this time. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm coming in with some Mechanica Standard Grey and I'm going to dry brush this all over the miniature. So I'm taking the Mechanica Standard Grey, working it into the bristles of my dry brush, so I'm leaving just a little bit of paint left on the brush. And now I'm going to dry brush all over the miniature. From the last time I used these pens, I remember how they had a slightly transparent appearance. So for this model, I'm trying a Zenithal highlight underneath the painting to see if that comes through and gives some more interesting results. So with the Mechanica Standard Grey, I'm giving quite a heavy dry brush all over the miniature, leaving that black in all the deepest recesses, but highlighting the rest of the model with the grey. And after the grey dry brush, you can see how it's picked out all of the raised details. I'm going to push this a little bit further with this Zenithal to really give these paints the best possible base to work from. So now I'm coming in with some Dawnstone. And once again I'm dry brushing this all over the model, but being slightly lighter than I was with the Mechanica Standard Grey, so I should get a nice transition as I build up through a few different colours and get a really nice Zenithal effect all over the miniature. So once again dry brush all over the model, but make sure you're a little bit lighter, leaving some of the Mechanica Standard Grey showing through, but catching all of the areas with some Dawnstone. After the Dawnstone dry brush, you can see how it's brightened up a lot of those areas on the Gretchin. So now I'm coming in with some Administratum Grey, and I'm going to do the same again, but once again being a little bit lighter than on the previous colour. By doing this, we'll get that really nice smooth transition from the back through all of the greys, giving us the best possible base for these paint pens to work from. So once again go all over the model, dry brushing it with some Administratum Grey, but leaving a bit of all the previous colours showing through. And after Administratum Grey dry brush, you can see it's really brightened up that model, picked out all of the details, we've got a lot of definition now all over our Gretchin. There's just one final dry brush now, and that's with some White Scar. And for this, I'm just dry brushing from the top down. So I only want to catch the most upwards and top facing surfaces. So I'm just dry brushing from the top of the model down to the bottom. This will leave all of the shadows in all the under areas and deeper recesses, but just catching the top facing surfaces with a little bit of white. And after that white scar's been applied, you can see how it's brightened up all those upwards facing surfaces. So now it's time to use the paint pens and see what effect we can get on this Gretchin. The first colour I'm coming in with is this Animal Green. I'm going to paint this all over the skin to the Gretchin. So as I learned before, these paint pens are very thin, so it's quite hard to keep control. But because of the Zenithal we've applied, I only want to get this over the areas I want to be skin. So I'm being very careful, making sure I only get the areas of skin on the Gretchin. I'm applying this Animal Green all over the skin. This is so thin, it does flow into all of the recesses, but luckily when it does dry, it doesn't seem to clog them up too much. So don't worry if it does appear a little bit too thick, it's just where the paint is so thin from the pen, it flows quite heavily into recesses. So I'm just taking my time at this stage, make sure I catch all of the skin with some of this Animal Green. And after that Animal Green has been applied, you can see how it's given a very light green colour to all of the skin. You can't really see that Zenithal Prime coming through from this colour, unfortunately. So now with some yellow, I'm going to pick out the little bit of fabric on the model. I'm just catching this bit of fabric hanging from his waist. So I'm just applying a layer of yellow all over this, hoping I get a solid coat. You can see this paint is a little bit thinner, a little bit more transparent, so that Zenithal Prime should show through quite well. I'm just carefully applying this, picking out all of the areas of fabric with a little bit of this yellow pen. We all know yellow can be a real pain to paint, and this paint pen doesn't seem to make that any easier than it is with a pot. It's very thin, and the coverage isn't fantastic, but hopefully this is where that Zenithal will come through and give us a great result. With that yellow applied, you can see how that Zenithal is showing through ever so slightly from that fabric. So now I'm coming in with a little bit of the leather, and I'm going to paint his belt and the straps. For this, I'm being really careful, just trying to use the tip of the paint pen. I'm just going to catch the belt going around his waist, trying not to get this over any of the other colours. I did learn from painting the Space Marine that you can paint back over these paints if you need to. And I'm also catching the strapping on his feet as well. I'm just making sure I catch this with a layer of the leather. And this leather does give quite a nice brown colour. It's quite good for belts and straps and things like that. But obviously the tip can be quite difficult to control. If you take your time, you should be alright. And with that leather applied, the Gretchin's starting to come together. We're getting some base colours on him. He's starting to look like a little green monster. So now I'm going to pick out all the metallics using the gun metal. So for this I want to pick out all the metallic parts to his weapon. Carefully applying this, trying to avoid the casing to the gun. Also picking out the trigger and the hammer at the back here. Obviously being careful around the skin at this stage. I'm also going to pick out parts here to this hand weapon tied around his waist. I'm leaving the bolt for now, I'll catch that with another colour later. And with all the metallics picked out, there's only a couple of base colours left to apply to this Gretchin before I try some more advanced techniques to create some shading and highlights. So next I'm using the black. I'm going to pick out the casing to the weapon. So for this I'm just picking these areas here that we left on the gun. This black seems to work really well with the Zenithal Prime actually. You can see how it's pulling away from the edges ever so slightly, like a contrast paint, and leaving those brighter parts at the edges. So for black, this trick works really well, whereas it may not work so well for some of the other colours. With the black applied, you can see it has given a really nice effect to that casing to the gun. So there's just one final base colour left to apply. And that's going to be with a little bit of gold. I'm just going to pick out the bolt on this weapon. I remember from painting the Ultramarine, the gold is really great. It does give good coverage and it's a nice bright gold. So I'm just carefully picking out the bolt at the top of this hand weapon with a bit of this gold paint.
If you're enjoying the video, please press like. If you want more videos, press the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. If you would like to support the channel and become a member, please press the join button down below.
With all the base colours applied, you can see we've got quite a flat looking Gretchin. So I'm going to do a couple of tricks to try and bring some life to that skin especially and add some definition. So first of all I'm coming in with this dark green pen. I'm going to try and sink this into the recesses of the skin. So where there's deeper shadows and areas like that, I'm just trying to apply a small line of this dark green, almost like a recessed shade, to try and add some definition to the skin, bring out all the muscles, details like that. The tip is quite large, can be a little bit difficult to control, so I'm just being nice and gentle, just trying to apply a few small spots in select areas of the skin just to add some definition to the Gretchin. See how I'm focusing on things like the inside of the ears, all of the deep parts of the faces and the muscles and between the fingers, just catching these with a little bit of this dark green. Normally I'd use a wash for this effect, because I don't have any washes here. I'm just using the pen to try and create it. As you can see, after I've applied that green, it's created some definition to the Gretchin. It's a little bit messy, but it has created some shadows. So now with some light green, I'm going to try and apply some highlights. So for this, I'm picking some of the sharpest points on the Gretchin, things like the tips of the ears, tops of the eyes, details like that. I'm just applying small spots of this light green, just to try and act like a highlight all over the skin. This was hoping that the first green I applied would have been quite thin, like a lot of the other paint pens, so the Zenithal prime would have shown through, really show me the areas that I should highlight, or even come through well enough that I wouldn't need to do this step. But unfortunately, that skin colour is quite opaque, so now I'm trying to come back through and add the definition. If you're not just using the paint pens, obviously a quick shade would have probably given a really nice skin effect, but because I'm trying to just use the paint pens to paint this model, I've got to pick out these areas and give my own highlights. With that highlight applied, you can see how it has added definition to the skin. It's a little bit messy, not quite as nice as I would have liked, but at least there is some shape to the skin. So now with some white, I'm going to pick out all of the teeth on the model. So I'm trying to keep the finest tip here to the paint pen, just picking out teeth on the Gretchin, as well as any fingernails and things like that. I'm just picking these out with a small spot of white. So all of these little extra details that add definition to the model really help stop it looking just like a flat blob of colour. With the teeth and fingernails picked out, added a little bit of definition. So it's just one final thing I'm going to paint on this model. I'm going to try and pick out the eyes. This could be difficult using these pens. First of all, I'm coming in with some black. I'm going to very carefully, using just the very tip, try and sink some black into the recesses of the eye socket. I'm going to keep control of this. I don't want this black to run all over and ruin everything I've already done. And then finally, with some of the white again, I'm just going to paint a small spot within the black. Normally I would come back in and add another layer of black again. Because of the size of these tips, there's no way I'd have the control to do that. So I'm just giving him cold, dead white eyes. I'm just trying to pick these out with a small spot of white. And with the eyes picked out, that is a Gretchin painted using the AK Playmarkers. Let me know in the comments down below, what do you think? Do you think he looks a little bit better than the Space Marine? Do you think trying to add shadows and highlights with the pens doesn't really work? And let me know in the comments down below as well if you'd like to see me use these Playmarkers as base coat and then use some shades and other paints on top to create the best looking miniatures possible. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, an extra special thank you to Jenkins, our Tea Lover channel member. Thank you so much for your support and helping me buy things like these Playmarkers to test out. And happy painting!